Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today. We're going to talk about teaching reading. So let me introduce myself. My name is Mairead and I am currently in Galway in the west of Ireland. So in a moment I'm going to look at the comments and see where you are all tuning in from today. I have quite a bit of experience in the world of teaching. This is my 20th year now working as a teacher and my 15th year as a teacher trainer. Okay, I've been with the TEFL Academy for 8 years now, and yeah, it's, I think, the best part of the job, just getting to meet people from all over the world. So let's get going, guys, because we have a lot to talk about today in terms of teaching reading. As ever, we're going to give a presentation. Well, I'm going to give a presentation for about 30 minutes. And after that, you will have the opportunity to ask me anything you want to know about teaching reading. All right. So if you're all ready, let's begin. So I guess the first question is, why is it important to teach reading? Well, lots of reasons. The fact is that students need to read in English. Okay, it's very hard to avoid it. They may need to read in English for work, for study, or just because they want to. Okay, maybe they just want to read for pleasure. Maybe read books in original version rather than translated versions, for example. Apart from the necessity in everyday life of reading, it's actually also really good for vocabulary, grammar, and for punctuation. It's amazing how much we can absorb from reading, even if we don't even realize that we're absorbing it. So, you know, just by seeing correct sentence structures, by seeing how punctuation is used, by seeing words in different contexts, you know, all of that will definitely aid learning. I'm sure you're all more than aware of this if you have ever learned another language yourself. Reading is also actually very good for writing. Okay, when students are reading a text, they're seeing models or examples of different text types, of different genres, of different structures. Okay, if they're reading a newspaper, for example, a newspaper article in English, as well as the content of that article, you know, your brain will be absorbing the structure. Is there a headline? Okay, what are the paragraphs like? How long is it? Etc. So the more you read, the more likely you are to be a good writer with a knowledge of how to structure a text correctly. Reading can be also a really good gateway skill for speaking. So if students have read a text about, for example, travel, the logical thing to do after that would be to do some speaking tasks related to travel. Okay, so you can take the theme of a text and transfer it into a speaking activity. So in other words, reading can be a springboard. Well, it can be a skill as and of itself, of course, but it can also be a springboard for imaginative and engaging lessons. We can take a reading text in any direction we want it to go. So when it comes to teaching reading, it's important to remember that reading is a receptive skill. Okay, we're taking in information rather than outputting information. Okay, so we call it a receptive skill. Much like listening. Listening is also a receptive skill. And if you read about how to teach reading and listening, you'll see there are a ton of similarities. Okay. So, for example, we would always start by engaging our students with the theme. Okay, then we might pre-teach some difficult vocabulary. We would let them read the text 2 or perhaps 3 times. Okay, we would finish up with a fun discussion task. The procedures for teaching reading and listening are very, very similar. We'll look at the procedure in a little more detail later on. So I have a question for you. What problems might students have when reading in English? So you can either think back to a time when you were a student doing reading activities in another language, that wasn't your first language, or you can just imagine what type of problems students might have when it comes to reading. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to type your answers in the chat box. And in the meantime, I'm going to look and see where all of you are. Okay, so hello, Nori in the Philippines, welcome. So Andrew, how's it going in Texas? We have Bournemouth, beautiful city, South Africa. Hello, Leigh. We have Carol, always a pleasure, Carol. Connor and Victor in Wales. Ah, wonderful, just across the Irish Sea. Bore da. Even though it isn't morning anymore, right? I don't know how to say good evening, I'm afraid. Okay, we have South Africa, Japan. Alabama, good Joe. I think I saw you here a few weeks ago too. And Megan in Wales too. Ah, loving all the Wales representation today. Larissa in Ireland. Ah, wonderful. Good to see you here. Great to see you all here. Okay, we have some answers coming in. Carol, you indicate a problem with vocabulary. Connor, not understanding the words. Yeah, very much so. Elaine, pronunciation. It could be, yeah, especially for those students who tend to say the words out loud in their head. They might stumble over a word they're not sure how to say. It wouldn't be so important for understanding, but yeah, possibly. Peter, the textbook may not be the right level. Yeah, exactly, Peter. It may be too difficult. That's always disheartening, isn't it? Kirsten, a different script. Yeah, maybe if they're coming from a country that does not use our Roman alphabet. Pronunciation. Okay, again, pronunciation maybe not so important when it comes to reading, but if it's something that will make them stop and hesitate, then it could become a sentence, I guess. Problems with grammar. Yes, Carrie, absolutely. Spelling, Alex, for sure. All the different variations of English can throw up some surprises. Russell, we have missing understanding. Yeah, lack of understanding for sure. Sentence structure. Not understanding idioms, Peter. That's a good one. So yeah, you all have some really, really great suggestions here. I can easily imagine all of these being issues. Figures of speech, word order, not being able to break the word down. Travel dreams, not phonetic. That's an interesting one. And yeah, they may know the word if they heard it, but because spelling in English is weird, they may not necessarily recognize it when it's written down. All right, so yes, good. Tons of really great ideas there, guys. I agree with pretty much everything. So some of the problems we've picked out here. If students don't know the vocabulary, yeah, that's a very clear problem. Students will need to either use a dictionary or come up with some sort of system to try to work out the meaning of the word in context. Okay. A lot of students now, they can use online dictionaries, so it's not so much of a hassle. But yeah, in class, it's always good to make sure that students know how to use a dictionary properly. We take it for granted that they do, but you know, we can always do some learner training here and show them how to use the dictionary effectively, how to interpret all of the information in it, etc. A problem that we may come across also is that it's a slow process sometimes. You know, even if the text isn't very long, if students keep coming across words that they don't understand, it can just demotivate them and they can lose interest pretty quickly. Okay. So, you know, it's not so much of an instant gratification skill. Reading can be slow going sometimes. Some of you, well, a lot of you mentioned this particular problem. Students may understand the individual words, but not the meaning in context. For example, when it comes to idioms or figures of speech, as one of you call them, if students see these words, drive, up, the wall. Okay, I'm sure most students will understand all of those words individually without any problem. However, if they see it in a sentence like, oh, this noise is driving me up the wall, they may think, oh, okay, I understand all of those words individually, but I have no idea what that sentence means, to drive someone up the wall. So that can be a big issue, the idiomatic nature of English. And I guess another problem that we may come across quite often as teachers is a lack of motivation. Okay, students just might not see the value of reading. Okay, they might not like doing it even in their own language. Yeah, they just want nothing to do with it. So that's an unfortunate problem. In the rest of the lesson, we're going to look at ways to hopefully overcome this lack of motivation. Before we look, though, at a typical structure for a reading lesson, let's look at some important terminology. If you do some further reading, on the science of reading, there are two terms that you will come up against pretty often. They're also explained in the online course. And those terms are top-down processing and bottom-up processing. Okay. Maybe you've heard about them before, maybe you haven't. Let's go through what they mean. So bottom-up processing, as the name suggests, yeah, we're starting at the very, very bottom, at the smallest level of detail, and we're building our understanding from there, okay, from the ground up. All right, so building understanding of a text from the individual small pieces. Okay, so your students will start at the first word, then go to the second, then go to the third. Yeah, they will read it unit by unit by unit, understanding all of the words until they have completed the text. There's another approach that we can take, and that is top-down processing. Okay, so as the name suggests here, top-down, we're departing from an overall view of the topic of the text. Okay, we are using what we already know about a text to predict content and structure. Okay, getting a basic impression of a text. So normally we will engage top-down processing before the reading starts. So we might say to our students, in a moment, we're going to read a text about a very interesting plane journey. Okay. What do you think the text might be about? Okay. What do you think might be mentioned in the text? Okay. We could also ask them something like, so in a moment, we're going to read a text about an interesting plane journey. Can you tell me about the most interesting plane journey that you have had? Okay. We could ask them something like, in a moment, we're going to read a text about an interesting plane journey. Okay. What is some vocabulary you expect to hear? Okay. So you see, with top-down processing, we're starting by activating their knowledge of the topic, okay, before they read. And the theory is that if we do this before they read, when it comes to the actual reading, their brains are already primed and full of prediction. Yeah. And I can tell you from experience that it really does help comprehension a lot. Okay. If we can just activate that prior knowledge before students start reading. Okay. So these are two separate processes that we can use. They are two separate processes, but honestly, we tend to work with them in tandem, okay, with each other. So before students start reading, we will start with some top-down, knowledge activation. And once we have done that, then when they're reading the text, they will follow the bottom-up process. Okay, they will read word by word and construct the meaning of the text. Okay, so we wouldn't just do one of those. Okay, we would use the two of them together. First top-down, then bottom-up. This will be explained in more detail in the online course. Okay, so don't worry too much if the terms are still a little confusing for you. Okay, some more terminology that you will come across a lot in the study of reading is intensive and extensive reading. Okay, intensive reading entails reading texts closely for understanding lots of detail. This is probably the reading you remember doing when you were in school, maybe in French lessons or in German lessons, or if English is not your first language, in English lessons. Okay, the teacher would, give you a text and give you a list of questions, and you would have to read that text in detail, okay, to answer the questions. Intensive reading usually involves a lot of stopping and starting. Okay, you read a sentence, you go back, you read it again. Maybe you read an entire paragraph and you think, okay, I'm not really sure I've understood. Let's go back again. Okay, so, intensive reading, there can be a lot of jumping about. Okay, it's not always just a smooth read until the finish. Okay. On the other hand, extensive reading is more like everyday life reading. Okay. It's the type of reading we do for pleasure. It's faster, it's more fluent. There is much less stopping and starting than its intensive counterpart. All right, so think of intensive reading as the type of reading you did at school to answer some questions. Okay, but think of extensive reading as the fun one. Yeah, the one you do because you're interested in the text and you just want to enjoy it, relax with it, and just reading for the sake of reading. So extensive reading, it will normally be done outside the classroom, okay, whereas intensive reading will be done in the classroom. So extensive is outside. It usually involves authentic texts. That is, texts that are not written specifically for learners. They are written for proficient speakers and readers of the language. So anything you can find on the internet that's originally written in English, maybe blogs, maybe magazines, newspapers. Yeah, all of those types of texts would be considered authentic texts. Maybe novels, poems, stories. Yeah, anything originally written in English for proficient speakers and readers of English are authentic texts. But also for the lower level learners, perhaps, readers can be a really great option. So readers are well-known novels or stories that are designed for language learners. So it could be a classic work of literature like Pride and Prejudice, but graded so that it's accessible for learners of English of different levels. It will be almost always a shorter version, a much shorter version. The words will be simplified. Okay, the sentence will be shortened. Yeah, it may even come with a mini dictionary or footnotes. Okay, readers are an amazing way to get our students used to reading full works. Okay, if you Google readers in English, I'm sure you will find a ton of resources. I would definitely recommend them to my students. Another really good thing about extensive reading is that students can jump into different stages of the text. Okay, like, with intensive reading, they really need to read everything, to understand all of the details. With extensive, they don't. Like, if they just have a favorite paragraph of a novel, they can just go back and read that. Yeah, they're under no pressure to read the whole thing. The same with perhaps a book of poems or a book of stories. They just go back to the one they like. Okay, there's no pressure to read everything. Basically, I think extensive reading lets students enjoy their reading. Okay, it takes away all of the pressure of understanding everything and just focuses on reading for the joy of reading. Okay, so yes, you will come across a lot of references to intensive and extensive reading. And as teachers, I think it's important to focus on both. Okay, try not to get sucked into always doing intensive reading. Okay, make sure that you encourage students to do extensive reading too. I guess that comes back to the lack of motivation that we talked about before. Of course, if reading is always a test, if it's always a comprehension exercise, it's going to get dull and students are going to resent it somewhat. So we counteract this by encouraging them to read things that interest them. Okay, find out what they like and recommend things that they can read about it as a strategy to develop their extensive reading for fun. Okay, some more terms that you will come across really, really often in relation to teaching reading is skimming and scanning. So skimming, it means reading very quickly for gist. Okay, key topics, main ideas, overall theme, basic structure and genre, etc. With skimming, we want students to just throw their eyes over the text from beginning to end. Okay, we're not interested in all the tiny details. We just want them to focus on the overall gist of the text. I'm sure you all do this yourself when you're reading in English in your everyday life. Imagine, for example, you pick up a newspaper. You don't read every word in the newspaper from beginning to end, right? Or at least I certainly don't. So I just throw my eyes around the page. I find something I like the look of, and then I throw my eyes across that article really quickly just to see if it's something that looks interesting. All right, and that is an example of skimming. Okay, so I may spend 5 seconds just going super, super quickly over the text, getting an idea for what it's about and if it interests me. Now, it takes me 5 seconds, and it would take all of you 5 seconds because we are, very, very proficient. We have a proficient understanding of English. With our students, it would take them longer to skim, maybe a minute, maybe 2. But either way, the process is the same. Okay, we're just looking over very quickly, trying to get the gist of the article. Once we have skimmed it, then we may go on to a more detailed reading if it interests us. Another term you may come across a lot is scanning. So scanning is also a very fast type of reading, but this time we're looking for specific information like numbers, dates, addresses, times and dates, prices, etc. Maybe a specific word, a specific term. An example of this in real life would be, for example, if we need to, let's see, when would we scan? So imagine we need to catch a bus into town and we're looking at a timetable. Okay, we don't start at the very first time and read all the way through. Okay, we just think, okay, well, now it's 4 p.m. So I'm going to go straight to the things beginning with 4 and I'm going to find the times, okay, of the buses leaving around now. Okay, that would be an example of scanning. We're just going straight for relevant information. Yeah, we're picking out a number, or it could be a name. Yeah, like if we read an article, but we don't remember the name of the person who was talked about in the article, we may go back to it and just like, name, here it is. Okay, so this is an example of scanning. They're quite different processes, but both of them are pretty quick and both of them are incredibly useful in real life. We can definitely train our students to do this or to do these types of reading in the classroom in order to prepare them to do it in everyday life. So that is skimming and scanning. You will see a lot more about these in the online course. Okay, so let's pull all of this together then. Let's talk a little about planning a reading lesson for our students. Lesson planning involves lots of things, as I'm sure you are aware, or you will be aware as soon as you get to assignment A in Unit 5. lesson plan involves thinking about the lesson aim and content. Okay, so what is your aim here? Is it to focus on skimming? Is it to focus on scanning? Is it to focus on intensive reading? Is it all of those things? Okay, you've got to have your aim clear before you start to plan the procedure of your lesson. Once you've thought about your lesson plan and content, once you've thought about your lesson aim and content, then you sit down and write your actual plan. Okay. While you're writing the plan, you will probably be creating or sourcing appropriate materials for lesson activities. Okay. So you will find the text you want to use. Or if you're using a textbook, you will already have the text you need to use. And then it'll be a matter of you creating tasks around that. Okay, maybe you want to make up your own skimming questions or scanning questions. Okay, maybe you want to put in more or fewer intensive reading questions. Okay, maybe you want to create a really fun speaking task related to the theme to follow up. Okay, it's very rare that a textbook will have everything you need. So be prepared to get creative and throw in your own ideas as to how best to exploit the text for your students. So when it comes to writing your plan, there will typically be 5 stages in a reading lesson. Let's run through them. Your first stage will be your warmer. Now, remember before we said that top-down processing involves starting at a point of knowledge, of pre-existing knowledge that your students have about a topic? Well, the warmer is the place to activate this. Okay, elicit the possible topic of the text using visuals, role play, etc. Okay, remember the examples we gave about, in a moment we're going to read about an interesting plane journey. Yeah, talk together about your most interesting journey. Okay, or predict what things could go wrong on a plane journey. Okay, so the warmer is the place to get students' brains warmed up to the topic of the text. Next, for the second stage, you're going to pre-teach vocabulary. Now, this is so important. A lot of you recognized the potential problem of not understanding words. That's a huge problem because when students come across a word they don't know, it stops them in their tracks. Okay, and it distracts them and they can't move forward until they know this word. So if we can find out the difficult vocabulary in advance, we can preempt all of our students' problems by pre-teaching that difficult vocabulary before they read it. So select key vocabulary items necessary for understanding the text. Okay. If you have studied Unit 5 of the online course, you will be familiar with language profilers. If you haven't, don't worry, you will get to it. So a language profiler is a really, really great tool for any teacher. So how you would use it is you would go along to the page, for example, Vocab Kitchen is the one we recommend. You would copy and paste the reading text that you're going to do with your students and drop it into the profiler and click Analyze. Then the profiler will categorize all of the words into levels. So if your students are, for example, B1 level, like intermediate, it would be interesting for you to know what words are classified as upper intermediate level or advanced level. Yeah, because if you pre-teach those to your students before they read, then when they do encounter them in the text, they won't be blocked by them. Okay, so the idea with pre-teaching is that we want to pre-teach the words that are above the level of our students. That's why a language profiler is an amazing tool. Of course, there may be 20 words above the level. Okay, and realistically, we don't have time to pre-teach 20 words. So, then you would have to go through it and pick out maybe the 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 I definitely wouldn't do any more than 10. You would pick out the 10 words that you think are most useful for understanding of the text. And you know what? This pre-teaching vocabulary, it also feeds into that top-down processing. Okay, it gives students even more information, even more context and more prediction of the text to come. So yeah, pre-teaching is really, really useful for many reasons. So the third stage then would typically be a first reading task. Students normally read every text twice. Okay, so the first time they read it, you want to set them questions that get them skimming and scanning. Okay, remember we said that those processes are so important for real life reading. Okay, so skimming, just throwing your eyes over, getting a general gist, and scanning, looking for specific information. So normally for the first reading task, there are only 2 or 3 questions. Okay, it's not very long. Yeah, 2 or 3 questions is enough. Maybe 1 skimming, 2 scanning, maybe 2 skimming, 1 scanning. Okay, and then after the first text or the first task is done, then we would correct it as a group. Okay, and then along comes the second reading task. So these are the questions that you may remember from school. Yeah, you're given, for example, 7 or 8 comprehension questions that will involve intensive reading. So you're going back, you're finding specific information, you're stopping, you're starting, you're locating. Yeah, that happens in the second reading task. Then finally, the 5th stage would be a follow-on communicative task. For example, a small group discussion based on the themes of the reading text. So it would normally be a speaking task. Ideally, we want students to put down the text. The reading is finished and it's time to activate fluency. Okay, it's time to practice some speaking. So, for example, if students have read a text about, let's see, imagine they've read a text about travel, yeah, about visiting a specific country. Your follow-on speaking task could be a role play, maybe, between person A, who wants to visit this country, and person B, who wants to visit a different country. So they've got to have a role play where person A needs to convince person B to come with them. Okay, and person B perhaps needs to convince person A to go to their country of choice. Yeah. Alternatively, you could give them just some normal discussion questions about holidays. Yeah. You could give them a ranking task where you give them maybe 8 different holiday destinations and they need to agree a common order. Yeah. It doesn't matter what the task is, as long as it's on the topic that was explored in the text and it involves speaking fluency. Okay, and if you can do those 5 stages in your reading lesson, you are guaranteed a successful one. Just to finish up, some other reading tasks might be reordering paragraphs, where you take the text, you chop it up into paragraphs, give the paragraphs to your students, and let them put them in logical order. And that can be a really fun, challenging one. You could do a jigsaw reading, where every student reads a different paragraph and then they come back together to tell each other what they have read. You could do a vocabulary task, like finding words in the text to match definitions. You could do a really fun skimming task, like deleting the title of the article or the text and then getting students to read it very, very quickly and write their own title or headline. You could take out random words and sentences and then get students to put them back in where they logically belong. You could turn it into a discussion task, yeah, like discuss interpretations, meanings, or feelings explored in the text. There are a ton of tasks that you can do aside from just the standard comprehension question. All right. Ooh, that was a lot of information about reading, wasn't it? Now I'm going to turn the floor over to all of you. Okay, if you have any questions related to teaching reading, please, now's your chance. Type them in the chat box and we will go through them. So while you're thinking of some questions you may have, I'm going to go through the comments already there and see if any questions have come in already. I also want to look some more at your ideas for potential problems because they were really, really good. So get typing your questions. We have lots of time left to answer them. Elena, you have a really good point here. When I asked you for the potential problems students may have reading, problems with short attention span, hence problems with focus and grasping ideas. Yeah, Elena, that is so true. And especially now, like, I don't want to speak badly of teenagers or young adults. I absolutely don't. I love teaching that age group, but that is a real problem, I think, with the youth of today. Short attention spans. I think that's why it's just vitally important to really engage their interest first. Yeah, aim for that top-down processing. Grab their attention, make it relevant to them, prepare them for what's to come. Yeah. And also, be careful with the length of text. Like, even very, very advanced students, we wouldn't be giving them super, super long things to read in class. We would leave that for their extensive reading outside of class. So try not to give texts that are overly long either. Okay. So KT, is the vocab scanner free? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to pop it in the chat box. So www.vocabkitchen.com. So that's the one that we recommend on the course, but there are others. Okay, there are lots of them out there. So just Google and check out the ones that you like. But Vocab Kitchen is a great place to start. Okay, Claire, specials flyer for supermarket. Oh yeah, that's a great example of an authentic text. Anything to do with advertising, I find, is usually amazing for using in the class. And the added advantage that, it's all free. You can grab a handful of them. Claire, that would be a great example of an authentic text. Okay, so hello, Carol. For business English students, what readings are suggested? Well, Carol, I would say for business English, try to stick to texts that they would encounter in everyday life. Okay, for example, if they get lots of emails or letters, you can definitely focus on texts of letters and emails, or maybe reports. Like if they read a lot of business reports, for example, see if you can get your hands on them and use them as reading texts. Try to give them stuff that is relevant to their everyday life. Okay, so, it's good to find out from them, ask them in the first class, like, what types of things do you normally read? Because I want to select stuff that will be actually useful for you. So find out what they read and then use that type of text for them. Otherwise, Carol, I always think it's interesting for business English schools to read things about like different cultures, cultural etiquette, how things are done in certain English-speaking countries, or perhaps they visit non-English speaking countries but do their communications through English. For example, I taught a group of Italian business people who did a lot of business in Japan. So when they would go to Japan, they communicated in English with their Japanese colleagues. So we did lots of texts on, like, reading texts on Japanese culture, what to do, what not to do, how to make small talk effectively. So I would say anything that's relevant to their real lives. Okay, go with that. That would be the most useful. Okay, thank you, Carol. Okay, hello, David. If you have students with different levels, how do you keep them all engaged on a reading task? Great question, David. So if there are like some higher levels and some lower levels, in the same class, your best bet is to practice what we call differentiation. So differentiation means giving slightly different tasks to slightly different students, depending on their levels. So for example, you might create a task with 10 comprehension questions. Yeah. Questions 1 to 5 can be pretty easy, and then questions 6 to 10 more difficult. So with the lower level students in the class, you can tell them, so you just need to read or you just need to answer questions 1 to 5. Okay. Whereas this side of the class, you can do all 10. All right. So that way we're kind of grading the tasks slightly, so that the lower levels get to do the easier section of it, but they still get to practice reading and they still get to improve, but in the context of a realistic task, whereas the higher level ones, they get to do the more difficult questions that will challenge them. All right. So yeah, try to practice here differentiation, like structuring your tasks so that they will cater for different levels within the same task. All right. So hopefully that will help them out a lot, David. It is difficult though, for sure, when you have like multi-levels within the same class. So Marisa, any suggestions for teaching online classes? In terms of reading? Really, in terms of reading, there's no real difference, except you may be sending them files in the chat box, rather than expecting them to read on screen. But, if they read on screen too, it's not the end of the world. Marisa, we have a webinar specifically on teaching online. If you go to our YouTube channel, you will find all of our webinars there. And yeah, there will be lots of them on teaching online. So I recommend that you check those out. Okay. So hello, Colour of Art. It's more about pre-teaching. That's okay. I have been having trouble typing the phonetic spelling for the teaching plan. Is there a more efficient way than copying and pasting each sound? Yes, Colour of Art, absolutely. So what I would do is go to an online dictionary, whichever one you prefer, type in the word that you need to transcribe, and voila, there it will be. Okay, the phonetics script or the phonetic transcription of the word will be under the word in the online dictionary. So just copy and paste the word into your plan. Okay, that's what I do. Love those online dictionaries. All right, thank you, Colour of Art. So hello, Quinn. Can we get the students to bring in their own authentic texts into class so that they are reading what they like? Yeah, absolutely. Why not? You may have a class dedicated to students just doing their own reading. Okay, bringing in what they like and doing it. If you want the whole class to do the same text, then it may take a little more organization. Students will need to bring in what they like, but you will need to vet them and make sure that they're suitable for everybody in the class. But, with a little bit of organization, sure, I don't see why not. That would be really good for their motivation if from time to time they get to choose what they read. Nice idea, Quinn. I like it. That could work. Okay, so hello, Russell. Have you used comic books or fantasy content for their age group? Honestly, Russell, I don't tend to use that type of genre. It could be because I myself am not interested in that genre, maybe. But anytime I have considered using it, I find the language to be really quite complex. We tend to assume that because it's comics, it's easier, but I find that the opposite is true. It's actually more complex. It's a lot of wordplay, a lot of sentences that are not technically grammatically correct, which is fine. It has its place. But yeah, I tend to find, I love the idea of using it because my students might like it, but in reality, I've never quite been able to make it work. Now, that is not to say that it can't be made work. I'm sure it can. Like if you find something that you think they'll really love, I'm sure you'll find a way to make it work. But yeah, it's not a genre that I tend to use too often. What I have done in the past, Russell, related to comics, I have found comic strips and I have blanked out the text. Okay, so I've just left the pictures and the speech bubbles. And then as a writing activity, I've given it to my students and asked them to fill in what they think the dialogue is. Okay, so, maybe you could still use comic books, but as a source for writing. Okay, but yeah, I'm confident, Russell, if you really want to, I'm confident you can make it work. Okay, so hello, Anna. Are there any special requirements for children or young adults with dyslexia? Oh yeah, Anna, it's difficult, isn't it? It's really difficult for those students suffering with dyslexia. I would advise, Anna, that you try to find out in advance if they have any struggles like this. Yeah, and if they do, then you can work with them. You can ask them what works best for them. You can do your research on special resources for dyslexic students. Knowledge is power with this one. And hopefully your school will be able to advise you of any students who are struggling with these issues in advance so that you can make your adjustments. Yeah, there's a lot of information out there, Anna, on how to make reading more accessible. So yeah, you would definitely need to do some background reading on that and work with the student. Make sure you check in with them and see, what helps, what doesn't, etc. Okay, so hello, Mike. Could you explain a little more about top-down and bottom-up? Also, is scanning and skimming of reading a simultaneous process, or should they be done separately? Good questions, Mike. So, as we said, top-down processing usually happens before students read. Okay, it taps into the knowledge they already have about a topic. So it warms their brains up somewhat before they read. Then when they sit down to actually read, they are doing bottom-up processing. Okay, they're starting on the word level and they're reading each word and like building that wall brick by brick or word by word. Okay, so we would activate top-down processing in the warmer and the pre-teaching. And then the actual reading stages, they would be more than likely doing bottom-up. Okay, reading word by word, intensive reading. Scanning and skimming, no, they're not simultaneous, Mike. We would typically do one and then do the other. So if you're planning questions for your first reading stage, maybe 2 questions could be related to skimming. Yeah, just general impression, throwing your eyes across the page. And then the 3rd question could be scanning, like find a specific number, or find the specific date that such a thing happened. Okay, so we would have skimming questions and then scanning questions. Okay, so yeah, they would be done separately, but still quite quickly in succession. Okay, so hopefully, Mike, that helps. Let me know if you need any further explanation. Okay, hello, Elaine. Any idea on creating interest in young readers to do extensive reading? I think that if we can nurture the love of reading at an early age, it will stay with the learner. It worked for my mom. Oh, yeah, absolutely, Elaine. Could not agree more. It's so important to build the habit. So for young readers, Elaine, I think extensive reading just has to be about fun. Okay, there needs to be no pressure. Okay, no obligation, no pressure. I think the best thing to do there, Elaine, is to really, talk to them, find out what they're interested in, like what cartoons do they like? Are they into superheroes? Are they into princess stories? Okay, what are they into? You've got to find that out and then try to provide them with options. Whether, you have access to books yourself, maybe your school has a library, in which case you can, build a little reading corner and let them dip in and dip out and look at the books and look at the pictures. And then if they want to take anything home to read it, amazing. Okay. But, we've just got to expose them to as much reading material as we can that they are likely to be interested in. Okay. Even in terms of building a love of reading with young kids, with young learners, bring in as many storybooks, picture books, big pages, bright colors, try to incorporate it as much as you can. Like, even if you're pre-teaching vocabulary, instead of just like showing them a picture of a word, see if you can find it in a storybook and like hold up the page and like, oh, what can you see here? What is it? What is it? What's this? Who knows what this is? Yeah. So just like incorporating books as much as you can, I think is your best bet there. Finding out what they like and trying to provide them with options of books or pointing them in the right direction to find those interesting books. And yeah, above all, just no pressure. Okay, keep it very light, very fun. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But yeah, I agree, Elaine. It's always been my mission to get my young learners into reading. Okay. So hello, Katie. Do we have access to free online leveled readers or picture books? In the course, no, not that I know of. Online, quite possibly. If you Google it, I'm sure there will be some free resource sites where you can access that. But yeah, not on the online course. But do your own research. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff out there. Okay, so hello, Kaiten. Should you stick to teaching British English by default, or do you need to ask your class? Oh, gosh, not necessarily, Kaiten. I would say it kind of depends where you're teaching, maybe the school you're teaching in, if they have a preference for one or the other. But honestly, Kaiten, just teach your English, okay? I would say, unless the school has a very hard line on what type of variation they prefer, stick to your own English, okay? For example, I'm from Ireland. Irish English and British English, they have a lot in common, but I teach my Irish English, because I don't speak British English, okay? I can definitely point out the features and say, well, in Ireland we say this, and in British English they say this, but stick to your own English, I would say, unless the school is very militant on that. Okay, Elaine, hello again. Do we need to learn the IPA off by heart? No, absolutely not. You will find probably that after many years, you will know it by heart, but no, that's not the objective. Normally, Elaine, there will be a poster in every classroom or an IPA chart. Okay. If there isn't, just, have your own one as a reference. No, you don't need to learn it by heart. Absolutely not. Don't worry about that. Focus on understanding the symbols rather than memorizing them. Okay. All right, so hello, Saju. When choosing vocabulary to pre-teach, is it more important to choose words that help within the context of the given text, or words that, is it more important to choose words that help within the context of the given text, or words that are more likely to come across in real life? Preferably both, Saju. I would recommend focusing on words they need to understand the text first. Yeah, because the text is yours and their immediate concern. Okay, but if there are some words in there that they're likely to come across in real life, amazing. Yeah, throw those in too, if it doesn't mean that you're then teaching too many words. But yeah, focus on the text first would be my recommendation. But there's no reason why you can't do both. Okay. Kaiten, since there's a difference in spelling and pronunciation. Yeah. So again, Kaiten, just, do what you feel, but also, you can make students aware. Like, say, for example, if I were teaching the word color, yeah, I would spell it with a C-O-L-O-U-R. Okay, so when I'm teaching that, I will say, so we spell it like this, but in American English, they don't use the U. Okay, so be aware of that. Okay, I use the U. In American English, they don't use the U, and that's fine. Okay, I would not change, though, the way I spell it. Okay, I would always spell it with a U. So it's just a matter of, doing what you do, but pointing out the differences. Okay, but yeah, stick to what you know. Otherwise, it just becomes a bit of a disorganized mess. Sometimes British English spelling, sometimes American spelling, Canadian. Yeah. So stick to what you know, but point out the differences. All right. Good. So hello again, Quinn. At what level can we get the students to write a report about a text? Well, I probably wouldn't have elementary students do it. Although they could still do basic sentences, maybe not a full report, but they could still say, like, it was good, it was interesting, I like the whatever, I didn't like whatever. So I guess elementary students could still do a basic one, but really as a writing exercise, I would say from intermediate upwards. Okay, because they'll be able to express their ideas a little more clearly, they'll be able to use slightly more complicated structures, etc. But yeah, technically, I guess any level can do it, as long as your expectations are graded realistically. Yeah, that's a really fun writing activity. I like that a lot. It really helps them to engage with the text. Okay. So hello, Flavia. Good afternoon, good evening. I want to know if there's a page or an app where the stress syllable is indicated for students who want to learn more and practice the tone of voice. Well, Flavia, the dictionary, I would say, is the best thing. When you look up a word in the dictionary and you look at the phonetic transcription, you'll always see an apostrophe-like symbol, like a high apostrophe. The apostrophe always comes directly before the stress syllable. Okay. So if the student looks up the word in the dictionary, tell them to look for the high apostrophe, and then they know that the syllable directly after that will be stressed. Okay. Apart from that, all of the online dictionaries these days, they have like a little audio link, like you'll see the little speaker. And if you click the speaker, it will say the word out loud for you. So, that will also help them a lot as to the correct stress on the word. All right. So yeah, the dictionary, Flavia. I wouldn't complicate it any further than that. Okay. Elena, they should be shown both variants, British and US. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, use what you use, but point out the differences, just so they're aware. Okay. So hello, Roberta, how are you? On a medium level of English, like intermediate level, is it more important to correct the spelling or the understanding? Because someone who hasn't got much problems on understanding, but a lot on spelling. Well, I guess, Roberta, for reading, spelling isn't such a big issue because, the words are already written and hopefully spelled correctly. So I don't really see how spelling is an issue in reading. And perhaps you can type another message and let me know what you mean here. For reading, yeah, understanding, I think, would be the most important, just overall understanding. But yeah, we have a minute left if you want to add on a question to that about spelling. Okay, let's see. Let me just run back and make sure I haven't missed anything. Because, yeah, we only have 20 seconds left. Oh my gosh, that went so quickly. That's a whole lot of speaking about reading. Thank you so much for staying with me. Okay, yes, I think I have everything. I think we've answered all of the questions. Let me just go down again. Okay, yeah, I think that's it, guys. So thank you for your thank yous. Much appreciated. Hopefully it will be useful for you when you get stuck into the online modules on reading and on planning reading lessons. As usual, if there's anything you don't understand about the instructions or the assignments or anything related to the online course content, please send a ticket to tutor support. Okay. In tutor support, we are always there, ready to answer any questions you may have. Okay, so please do send us a ticket if you have any questions about anything course related. As ever, we would love to get, before I say that, let me remind you that all previous webinars are available on the TEFL Academy YouTube channel. Okay, we have years worth of webinars there on every topic you can imagine. Okay, so get yourselves along to our YouTube channel and you will see all of the webinars there. The final thing I want to ask you to do is, if you have a moment, please fill in our end of webinar survey. As teachers, we are always looking to improve. Okay, so your feedback is really, really important to us. If you have a moment, please go along to that website and fill in our survey. It's not obligatory to do so, but we would appreciate it. So if you have a QR scanner, you can go there directly if you scan the barcode. If not, I will write the survey link in the chat box. TTA Live. All right, there we go. All right, so thank you very much for sticking with me. That was a whole lot of information, and I hope to see you all again soon. All right, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.